Hello, BookTube. I have some mail for you. We've gone through a bit of a mail moment this week on this channel, where I basically wondered, am I being overindulgent with these mail hauls? Am I pleasing myself when I should be thinking about you? And I have heard resoundingly that you want the mail hauls to continue, that you don't think they're overindulgent at all. And what's probably most important to me, that you get a lot of use out of them. Whether you rush right out and buy any of these books or not, you use these mail hauls. The advanced look and the friendly commentary allows you to know what you want to ask your libraries to order, what do you want to reserve, that sort of thing. And that's perfect. That's just what I want. So we'll go through the mail now. I have one measly manila envelope, and all the others are cardboard envelopes. So that could mean a lot of finished copies. Let's see what this first one is. Okay. All right. I have been on a massive murder mystery binge in 2020, and murder mysteries, crime novels, thrillers, that sort of thing. And this is feeding right into that. Fantastic. And it's February 25th, which is even better. That means I can go at it right away. This is the finished copy of Walter Mosley's book, Trouble Is What I Do. I have been so in the mood for books like this. Morally ambiguous private investigator Leonard McNeill is back and investigating crimes against society's most downtrodden. In this installment of the beloved detective series from the Edgar Award-winning and best-selling crime novelist, Leonard McNeill spent a lifetime building up his reputation in the New York investigative scene. His seemingly infallible instinct and inside knowledge of the crime world make him the ideal man to help when Philip Worry comes knocking. Philip Catfish Worry is a 92-year-old Mississippi blues man who needs Leonard's help with a simple task: deliver a letter revealing the black lineage of a wealthy heiress and her corrupt father. Unsurprisingly, the opportunity to do a simple favor while shocking the prevailing elite is too much for Leonard to resist. But when a famed and feared assassin puts a hit on Catfish, Leonard has no choice but to confront the ghost of his own felonious past. Working to protect his client and his own family, Leonard must reach the heiress on the eve of her wedding before her powerful father kills those who hold the family secret. Fantastic. Okay. Okay, great. This is the pub sheet says this is everything you've come to expect from Mosley. This one is sexy and jazzy, and even though it packs a punch on every page, Trouble Is What I Do manages to feel as sweet and unhurried as honey and as warm as a tumbler of whiskey. And that's okay. Well, we'll see. This comes out in late February, so I'm in the perfect position to just read it, and it's only an hour to read, less than that. So we'll see. Trouble Is What I Do. Certainly love the title. Now we'll move on to these white envelopes and see what we have. Let's see what this first one is. They could all be finished copies. Okay. I think we saw this already. We will, if these are finished copies, all of them, we will have seen a lot of them already. This is David Farrier's book, Footprints, In Search of Future Fossils. Look at those rusted out things there. Okay, well, we have an interview, and we have blurbs, more blurbs. Let's see. What will the world look like in 10,000 years? Or 10 million? What kinds of stories will it tell about us? In this book, the author surveys the traces we will leave for people of the very distant future. Modern civilization has created objects and landscapes with the potential to endure through deep time, including the plastic polluting the oceans, the nuclear waste entombed within the earth, and the 30 million miles of paved roads spanning the globe. Our carbon could linger longer in the atmosphere for 100,000 years, and the remains of our cities will persist millions of years from now as a layer in the rock. These future fossils have the potential to reveal much about how we lived in the 21st century. I remember reading about this the first time and being fascinated by it. This comes out in early March. I am blasting my way through February books, so I'm not, except for with a couple of exceptions, I'm not reading any March books at the moment. But that's on my list. I'll swap out the advanced copy. Let's see. Oh, fantastic. Okay, we've seen this before. We've seen this book before as well. But in between when we saw it before and now, I have actually read it, and I want to enthusiastically praise it to you. This is also a March book, if I remember correctly. No, late February. This is late February, and it's incredible. It's incredibly good. It's by Joanne McNeill, and it's called Lurking: How a Person Becomes a User. And it deals with the internet, but the ominous sort of almost drug addict tone of the subtitle is well advised, because this is a disturbing book, and it's about all of us. Let's see here. In this book, Joanne McNeill points to the Edward Snowden leaks as a key moment in the history of how we think and talk about the internet. After 2013, breathless technology coverage from America's business and media and facile debates about whether the internet is good or bad made room for more nuanced criticism that actually focused on the issues, questions of privacy, security, and how platforms manipulate their users. Of course, these issues weren't all baked into the internet from the beginning. Things didn't necessarily need to go this way. With Lurking, Joanne McNeill gives us a perspective-shifting personal history on the internet from the early 1990s, roughly the beginning of the internet that we know today, to the present. But Lurking is not a book focused on rapid technological advancement or game-changing startups. Some of that is here, of course. But Lurking is first and foremost a cultural history from the perspective of the user. And it's amazing. You will never, I know it's a trite thing to say, but you will never look at your own relationship to the internet again the same way after this book. And the author was the inaugural winner of the Carl and Marilyn Thoma Art Foundation Award, Foundation's Art Writing Award for an emerging writer. And this is her first book. Lurking is her first book. I will be reviewing it for the Christian Science Monitor, and I can't recommend it strongly enough. So we're off to a good start. A crime thriller, crime fiction, and two really interesting works of sort of general nonfiction. So we don't have a dud yet. Let's hope we can keep that up. That's like probably just curse things right there. Okay, this next one is an advanced copy, so it's not a finished copy at all. What have we got here? Oh, you're kidding me. Okay, fantastic. This comes out in early May, and once again, it's amazing how sometimes the Brattle sale carts at the Brattle Bookshop, or even the mail halls here on this channel, will reflect a sudden interest of mine, or maybe I just noticed them more. This one is by Wendy Lesser, and it's called Scandinavian Noir: In Pursuit of a Mystery. So this is all about mysteries. This is fantastic. Let's see here. Wendy Lesser is the author of around a dozen books, but it's only more recently that she has begun to get her proper public due as one of our premier cultural critics. I use cultural critic hesitantly because the label scarcely captures how original she is. You leave that to me, Seymour. Okay? You're paid to say she's original. An eclectic, gloriously idiosyncratic, self-avowed amateur with no academic or media affiliations besides the Threepenny Review, the magazine she founded and has run for the past 4 decades. Lesser has a habit of venturing into treacherous topics closely guarded by insiders and winning over the most seasoned of experts. With Music for Silenced Voices, she dove into the shark-infested waters of Shostakovich scholarship and emerged with all her fingers and toes intact. That's pretty funny, although the pub sheet has intact as 2 words. With no particular background in architecture, she wrote a biography of Louis Kahn that was received in the close-knit field as a major contribution. In Scandinavian Noir, her subject is, for many readers, more accessible and familiar. The addictive, singularly twisted, socially charged breed of Scandinavian crime fiction that in recent decades has become a pop culture juggernaut in America. So this is a nonfiction work about Scandinavian noir. Unbelievable. It's right up my alley. Uh, many Many more of us will have sampled these books than will have seen Shostakovich's string quartets performed live or walked through a Kahn building. Yet, like Lesser's previous books, there is no prior reading or knowledge required. With characteristic DIY spirit, she begins her Scandinavian crime adventure as nothing more than a fan in a reading chair, albeit a particularly zealous one. What particularly fascinates Lesser about these books is not just their unputdownable plots, companionable characters, and social critiques, but the richness of the world they collectively conjured. Though she has never once visited Scandinavia, she has the sensation of an imaginary region coming into being around her. Fantastic. Fantastic. You need say no more. Fantastic. Okay. Great. Well, I want to read this right away. This comes out in early May. I don't think I will, but that is fantastic. Okay. So a nonfiction study of Scandinavian noir, where it comes from, what it's like, who practices it, and what might explain its incredible popularity in America. Great. Okay, so let's just move on here. Let's move on to this next one. Oh, fantastic. All right. This is also a finished copy. This is a finished copy of an author I really like. This is Beyond the Sea by Paul Lynch. And once again, we have only blurbs. We have only blurbs. Sheesh, oh my. Okay. All right, well, we have only blurbs, but one of them is by M. John Harrison, so you can't do much better than that. Let me read you from the book here. This tells the story of two South American fishermen, Bolivar and Hector, who go to sea before a catastrophic storm despite warnings. The storm arrives, and though the two men survive, they're blown hundreds of miles out into the Pacific Ocean with little hope of rescue. Remember this? Remember when we got the advanced copy of this? Coming to terms with their new reality, the men are forced to accept their separation from the modern world, their sudden and inescapable intimacy, and the limits of hope, survival, and faith. As the days go by and time falls away, they grapple with the mistakes of their past, the severity of their present, and the uncertainty of their future. They fight to maintain their will to live, but nothing in the barren seascape or in their minds promises that they will make it. I wonder if this will tell me. Yeah, okay, this is the author of the novel Grace, Red Sky and Morning, and Black Snow, and I cannot recommend him strongly enough. This book comes out again in early March, but I am hoping that it gets widely reviewed. Very much hoping. Oh no! Oh, here's a non-cardboard. This is I missed one. There's an envelope that's not cardboard, and it's not coming open at my command here. You should probably talk amongst yourselves since I don't have scissors nearby either. The Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Discuss amongst yourselves. All right, I've got a thread started here. Maybe we should just come back to this one and do the cardboard ones. At least have the virtue of being easy to open when you're not feeling all that good. This is slowly making its way here. Okay, there we go. All right, let's see if this is worth the bother. Steve's rule of thumb is the harder it is to get out of the package, the less worthwhile it is to do so. But I could be wrong. Let's see. Okay, this is called 7 Lies. Came in a very nice box. I always think it's such a shame that the advanced copies will do this sort of thing, but the finished book will not. I think finished books are so expensive that I wouldn't be asking much to have them have fun stuff like this, but instead it's only the advanced copies that ever do. So what is here? This comes out in June. The actual cover of the book is quite pretty. It's by Elizabeth Kay, and it's called 7 Lies. When Elizabeth Kay's debut novel made the submission rounds, it became one of the most sought-after novels of last year and was immediately sold all over the world at the London Book Fair. I wonder if Jennifer, to insert literary pun here, knows about this. Now, with a TV deal already secured and publishing rights sold in nearly 20 countries, 7 Lies is gearing up to be one of the most anticipated summer reads of 2020. A seductive and unsettling novel, it examines how one lie inevitably leads to another, and how the worst of them can lead inevitably to something much worse. Well, I would not have started a pub sheet that way, I guess. So the book was the most sought after novel of last year, immediately sold all over the world at the London Book Fair, and has now has a TV deal and has secured publishing rights in nearly 20 countries. So this author's hated pretty widely. And on top of that, the pub sheet starts by saying that it lives up to the promise of all of that bandwagon jumping and is the greatest thing since sliced bud. So let's see. It can't, in other words, live up to that. It can't possibly live up to that. And we saw a few examples last year of books that had that kind of advanced hype in the publishing world alone. Most of the reading public in general usually didn't know about the hype, but they fell flat on their faces. They got the day reviewer mildly positive review in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, and then no one read them. So let's see here. 7 Lies follows the friendship of Jane and Marnie, inseparable since they met at 11 years old. When they each meet the man of their dreams, their close ties seem to loosen, but their weekly Friday dinners at Marnie's remain sacrosanct. It's a tradition that's made more difficult for Jane since she absolutely hates Marnie's husband, whom she thinks is an obnoxious, pretentious bore. But since her friendship with Marnie means more to Jane than anything, she keeps this to herself. That's the first lie. But of course it's not the last, and here that one lie may mean the difference between Marnie's husband being alive and dead, or dead. Okay, well, all right. Okay, so 7 Lies is going to be a must-have for beach bags this summer. All right, I would not have made any of the decisions that the pub sheet is making, but maybe they are well taken. Maybe they will work. I would not have made any of these decisions. But you can see the hook, at least. There's one kind of hook immediately, because that kind of thing where you can't stand the husband of your dear old friend is fairly common. So to have that be the first pebble that starts an avalanche that leads to murder, that's an interesting enough premise on its own. We shall see. I guess it counts as a murder mystery, doesn't it? Or might count as a murder mystery. The pub sheet was so busy making bad decisions that it didn't tell me much about the plot. Well, I'll get to it. That's not anytime soon, but I'll get to it. Okay, this next one is by Jennifer Rosner, and it is due in early March. Okay, so the March books are starting to come. And this is The Yellow Bird Sings. Let's see here. Parents always take joy in watching their children grow as they learn to walk and speak and enter the world on their own. But what if the lives of a mother and child depended on their silence? Jennifer Rosner's heart-rending and transporting debut novel. Another debut. Good Lord. It's another debut. Okay, great. Imagines a mother and her 5-year-old daughter hiding out in a barn in German-occupied Poland who risk their lives every time they make a sound. Okay. No sign of whether or not Jennifer Rosner was part of a gigantic multinational bidding war. And just as well. So, just better for her. It's better for her if the pub sheet isn't talking about such things. Okay, well, she's the author of a memoir and a children's book, and she lives in Western Massachusetts with her family. So this comes out in early March. It's the sort of thing I could get to. Because we're approaching mid-February, so I'm trying to get everything in February done and squared away. So it won't be long before I start to move on to March books, and that will be right there. All right, so let's see what this last one is. It's an advance copy, so we've had a range of things here. What do we got here? Oh my, okay. All right. This is from Oxford University Press. So this will be late. This will come out in June. This comes out in June. And it's by Brian Holden Reed, and it's called The Scourge of War, The Life of William Tecumseh Sherman. So this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be um, a 600-page new biography of William Tecumseh Sherman. So let's see what we have here. Those of you who are Civil War buffs, Civil War addicts, I know quite a few. And in fact, I know some of you are. I know quite a few people who read books about every book about the American Civil War. They just don't miss anything. And a major thing like this, they certainly won't miss. So, prick up your ears, those of you to whom that applies. William Tecumseh Sherman is one of the best-known generals of the Civil War and one of the key architects of the North's ultimate victory. He is often remembered, however, as a ruthless, heartless, and unprincipled destroyer who unleashed death and destruction in his wake. This villainous reputation, however, veers drastically from the reality of Sherman's actions during the war. In The Scourge of War, leading military and Civil War historian Brian Holden Reed offers a definitive life and times account of this key Civil War figure that challenges many of the well-known stereotypes that have dogged his legacy. Holden Reed argues that Sherman was not hostile to the South throughout his life, and that accounts of Union troops resorting to unlimited levels of destruction have been exaggerated. By examining Sherman's childhood and education, his business ventures in California, his antebellum leadership as a military college in Louisiana, and numerous career false starts, Holden Reed shows how unlikely his exceptional Civil War career would seem. He also demonstrates how crucial Sherman's family was to his professional path, particularly his wife's intervention after a mental breakdown in 1861, which saved his career. Okay, so the contention in the first paragraph is you're saying that he wasn't a monster of rapine and destruction that his reputation has always held him to be. And your point in the second paragraph seems to be that he had an interesting childhood, a loving wife, and a bunch of failed business ventures before and after the war. Holden Reed narrates Sherman's battlefield career and the gradual lifting of his pessimism that the South was better organized for war and more determined than the North. He analyzes Sherman's development as a commander and especially his crucial friendships with Henry Halleck and Ulysses S. Grant, and details how Sherman overcame his initial weaknesses as a leader to mature as a self-confident strategist. A self-confident strategist. Self-confident, maybe, but that self-confident in that sentence is clearly meant to do the work of good. That he was a good strategist, and he wasn't. He wasn't. He was self-evidently not. In the beginning of his Civil War campaign career, and at the end of it, he didn't learn a thing. In The Scourge of War, Holden Reed offers a masterful account of Sherman's life that fully recognizes his intellect, strategy, and ability to put his ideas into practice during the Civil War. Okay, well, no one's denying his intellect. No one's denying his his intellect or his ability. You're saying what you want to do is describe his ability to put ideas into practice during the Civil War, but you're also contesting what those ideas were. And Sherman's idea, arrived at shortly after he returned from service after that breakdown in 1861, the main idea was the way to prosecute this war is to destroy the social fabric of the South. The way to prosecute this war and get it done fast and get it done without any pussyfooting is to break the rule of war that had existed for 3,000 years and attack the civilian population. It had certainly existed in American society, since American society existed long before there was a United States of America. Sherman's idea was to make, as he put it, to make Georgia howl, make the South howl, make the people so miserable and so deprived of every single staple of life that the whole area cannot prosecute the war anymore. Now, you can argue in your new biography of William Sherman whether or not that philosophy is correct. Maybe it's the same thing as the justifications that I've heard for dropping atom bombs on 2 Japanese cities full of civilians and women and children. And that is that, as horrific as that is, it ultimately saves lives, because a long, protracted, arduous island-hopping campaign in which every single Japanese military defender was dedicated to fighting for every last inch of ground to the death would certainly have escalated the death toll into the millions. And that if you weigh that against the hundreds of thousands who died in fire in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you are saving lives. If you want to make that argument about Sherman's campaigns, his march to the sea, there's an argument to be made there. It's a horrific argument. But it still can be made. But what you're going to need to do to write a book in which you say that Sherman was not, what was that? Was not hostile to the South. We can just leave that out. If you're not hostile to the South, you've got a mighty funny way of showing it. But what was the other thing? Heartless and unprincipled destroyer who unleashed death and destruction in his wake. That's entirely true. And if you're going to make a case that that isn't true, what you're going to have to do as a historian is set out with the goal in mind of ignoring primary sources, which is kind of the opposite of what a historian's supposed to do. If you're going to set out to write a book like this and you're going to say, well, I have an idea that Sherman wasn't as bad as all that in Georgia and North Carolina. And the main problem I have, the main people getting in the way of that, are all of the first-hand witnesses and newspaper accounts in Georgia at the time. So I'm going to discount them as just sort of Southern propaganda and write around them. Sure. Well, certainly you'll get lots of help from American historians on that point. American Civil War historians have been romanticizing Sherman since he announced, the South is yours, that I've give it to you as a Christmas present, or whatever horrific thing he did on a pile of quivering, still bleeding bodies. You'll get a lot of help from American historians if that's the picture that you want to paint. But the truth of the matter is easily discernible, and it's horrifying. It is an army living off the land in a march of utter wanton destruction. So you get to a major railroad hub, and you are not just destroying all of the buildings by fire and dispossessing all of the people, whether they are involved or not, whether they're near the train depots or not, whether they have ever seen a troop moving in any direction or not. Kill or dispossess everyone within a 5-mile radius. Not just that, but also those back roads, those curving ravines, those places that are a dozen miles away from here. Send a detachment, clear them out, kill everyone there. Take everything that you can. Take everything that you can carry, all the food, all the property, everything. And attested in many, many Southern newspapers and many Southern accounts, vast amounts of systematic looting and raping. Now, the American historians don't like to write about that. They don't like Sherman, Ulysses S. Grant's best friend, to be the kind of person who would not only authorize that, but make it the ethos of his march to the sea. But, all right, I'm arguing with this author, and I shouldn't be because I'm wasting your time. I will gladly argue with this author. Gladly, I will. This doesn't come out until June, so I don't have to worry about it for now. But we have seen this before. We have seen this before on this channel. Biographers tend to do this sort of thing. It's not a crime. They tend to do this sort of thing. They tend to say, well, here's the new angle on my book. And 2 we saw last year that said that George Washington's mother was not actually a horrible harridan, like everyone at the time said she was, and like every historian has said since, that there was actually a lot to her. She was sort of a proto-modern woman, whatever they were. One of them was conscientious and a little bit dull. The other one was less conscientious and far better written, and both of them were complete failures in that one goal of theirs, which was to be a bit revisionist. Because there's nowhere to go. You have to ignore the documentary evidence in order to build your case. And I'll have to wait and see what this author does. Certainly, if you're a Civil War buff, you're going to want this book. And if you're a Civil War buff who likes to pad your local library and haunt your local library, you want to make sure to order this thing. Make sure they know that it's coming, The Scourge of War. This is going to be a major American Civil War release from a huge publisher. But as a revision, Sherman not only was an embodiment of heartless, ruthless, total warfare conducted on civilians, not only was he the embodiment of that, but it was a very conscious choice on his part. It was a very conscious choice when he returned to the theater of war, that this is now how I'm going to operate. So I'm not just going to meet my opponents on the battlefield, although so many times when he did, he just wasn't prepared at all. Just elementary mistakes. So not only am I going to do that, but before and after those encounters, I am going to attack the civilian populace. I'm going to tell my men, outside Compton or wherever, go and requisition every single piece of livestock that you can. And the men would say, well, sir, we have plenty for our next destination. And he would say, all right, then kill them all. But don't leave anything alive. Don't leave any chickens, any pigs, any cattle alive. If you're not going to requisition them, then kill them. If you meet any opposition, kill the opposition. If you don't meet any opposition, feel free to burn their houses. If they come running out and any of them are female, well, there's no written orders to that effect, but there are an enormous number. Well, again, I'm arguing with the author. I don't want to do that anymore. So we will see. We will see. The Scourge of War. It's clearly the title is meant to tilt at that image, and the author intends to soften it a bit. We'll see. The author could succeed. Then The Yellow Bird Sings, historical fiction and a debut. Seven Lies, also a debut. Much ballyhooed, one gathers. Beyond the Sea by Paul Lynch, not his debut, but a very talented purveyor of contemporary fiction. Scandinavian Noir, Wendy Lesser's examination of the phenomenon. So it's not an example of an Icelandic cop who drinks all day long and his superiors don't seem to mind, and who misses obvious clues in chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3, and you, the reader, are saying, why do you still have a job? And who occasionally leaves his desk in the squad room to go down the hall to the bathroom, and we follow him because no squalid detail is too squalid, and as he's sitting there in the stall, he's looking at his underwear bunched around his ankles and saying, my underwear is really dirty, I might need to change it or even buy a pair. And you're reading that, and it's in every single one of these ridiculous novels, and you're thinking, okay, well, so you're an unhygienic, alcoholic oaf, and I should be reading about you and watching you characterized as some sort of crime-solving genius. Why? so this will be an examination of that. We'll see what kind of take she has. Then Joanne McNeill's Lurking, which I strongly, strongly recommend. You should order it. Use a discount coupon at Barnes & Noble, forego a couple of cafe lattes at Barnes & Noble, order it into your library. It's a very, very important work on how we got to where we are and what we're doing about where we are. Then Footprints, which is about future archaeology. What things are we leaving for the archaeologists of the future? And lastly, Trouble Is What I Do by Walter Mosley. Tiny little thing, really a novella that it won't take me any time at all, but it's right up the alley of what I've been reading lately. So there you go. That is a mail haul for you. We'll see what more comes today, or maybe we'll take a break from the mail tomorrow. But either way, I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.